In 2006, Human Head in collaboration with 3D Realms released Prey, a shooter that, while being a fine game in its own right, owed much of its success to its association with the creators of Duke Nukem. It released 2 years after Doom 3, and the fact that it released on, at the time, the brand spanking new Xbox 360, where it had almost no competition in the race to compete for the shooter-hungry gamers' attentions. That meant that it sold well, very well actually, and a sequel was greenlit in 2007 and started development shortly thereafter. Through some corporate shenanigans between 3D Realms, Bethesda, Human Head and 2K Games, the rights to the series ended up with Bethesda in 2011, and they quietly cancelled the sequel later that year. I say quietly because it was not officially cancelled until 2014, and by that point they had already handed the rights over to the series to Arcane back in 2013 and tasked them to remake it. And in 2017 they released Prey, New Prey. It had absolutely nothing to do with Prey, and as a result the title of the game itself makes no sense. See, the Prey in Prey, Old Prey, refers to the situation the protagonist finds himself in. He is the prey but turns on his predators and becomes the predator to their prey, and he's Native American, and the animal, the osprey, is an important spiritual animal to them, and the motif of one features heavily within the game, even on the box art itself. New Prey, on the other hand, is a game about a scientist man that wakes up with amnesia on an abandoned space station in space that's full of aliens that want to play hide and seek, and there is box stacking to get into air vents and audio logs that tells the game's story. Prey 2017 is an Unofficial System Shock 2 remake, and it's absolutely fantastic, and we're gonna play it.
Clear skies all the way. That's a nice view on the bay there. Here we are, Mr. Yu. Mind the glass on the way out. Good luck to you.
It's 2032, you are Morgan Yu, a man or a woman, and it's your first day of working for the TranStar Corporation, a company run by your brother that owns and operates a space station that develops and sells neuromods. Neuromods are small machines that can be injected into a subject, and they will teach the subject advanced skill in an instant or grant them superpowers. But this isn't your first day working for the TranStar Corporation.
Alex,
Simmons, what's going on?
we have a problem.
What about Morgan?
He's alive, sedated.
Clean it up. I'm on my way.
It's been 3 years and you're in a simulation aboard a space station, the Talos 1. Apparently you have been a willing guinea pig testing neuromods, and a side effect of removing a neuromod is that it wipes the subject's memory. Neuromods came to be because of experimentation on an alien race known as the Typhon, that the Soviet cosmonauts encountered almost 100 years ago during the space race in an alternate history Earth. Humanity has been studying them in this alternate history ever since then, but now they have broken containment and killed everyone aboard the Talos. Luckily for us, one of the past iterations of Morgan's consciousness has created an AI of himself and instructed that AI to record the actions of each new Morgan, so that if something happened, the AI named January could fill the new Morgan in and help him deal with whatever happened and fill him in on whatever the previous Morgan had done. What comes next is the diving part of a deep dive RPG. We have an objective: reach Dr. Calvino's office and get his keycard from him and use that keycard to enter the lab where we need to go, but the road from us to him is long and we're poorly equipped. And it's here that deep dives typically strip the player of their pride and makes them their bitch, and System Shock, New Prey, is no exception. The mimics are many and they are sneaky, and if we are to vanquish them, we will need to acquaint ourselves with the game's sneaky mechanics, learn the ins and outs of how the wrench works, the weakest weapon in the game, and we will need to learn to keep an eye out for random junk on the ground that we can pick up and then throw to distract the enemy, and we will need to get familiar with terminals and teach ourselves how to actually read emails instead of just clicking until the number of unread messages reaches 0, because while Prey will keep track of passwords for you, there will still be information contained in the emails that will be vital to progressing. All this means that when you reach the point where you are standing opposite of a neuromod that's contained within a glass mantra, you know instinctively to smash a glass instead of just sitting in front of the mantra like a dummy and wait for the game to hand you the item. The neuromod grants access to the game's skill tree, and while I'll go more in depth with it later, I'm gonna say for now that it's one of the better skill systems I have seen. Every perk feels equally significant, and one or two abilities gained from them can completely change how the game is played and what parts of the Talos one are accessible to you. Like, there is a hacking skill in here, and if you don't take that, you won't have access to any of the terminals or door locked behind a level 2 hack skill or higher. And this game doesn't actually at any point throw you a bone and artificially lower a terminal's hacking level because of plot convenience. It will give you another much longer option, but it will hold a locked door over your head every time you miss out on it because of a skill check, and it will keep reminding you that you could have spent your points differently. And not in an annoying way, but in a way that makes you want to play it different another time around, or possibly, change up what your next skills will be. Generally, a lot of things are opening up in the game as we make our way towards Dr. Calvino's office, and some of them are literal openings like the aforementioned terminals and doors that can be hacked, and the air vents which are apparently everywhere and grants access into every room. But finding them can sometimes be a bit difficult, and actually getting up to where they are is sometimes impossible. Or rather, it was impossible to me at this point, because while I did pick up the glue gun, a weapon that creates balls of matter that can be used to stun mimics and seal fire hazards, it took me a good 8 hours to realize that I could also use it to create platforms and shoot glue into gaps in inaccessible areas to knock things over to cause a reaction and possibly open a door. The glue gun is fun, and I will go more in depth with it later. Around this point, the silent pistol and the various bombs that can be thrown or deployed also begin showing up. We're not gonna find a lot of bombs or ammo for the gun, but what we are gonna find are recycle station and manufacturing stations, and we can use the junk we collect around the Talos to convert into its raw materials and use those raw materials to manufacture ammo, gadgets, health items, and even some guns. I would actually advise to pick the inventory size upgrade straight away, because the default inventory size holds basically nothing. And when you can't hold a lot, you can't make a lot of bullets and you're gonna have a bad time. And just by putting points into the first upgrades, I didn't find myself at any point being short on inventory space ever again. And I'm the type of player that keeps every type of weapons on me just in case I might need it down the road. And also, I guess, every type of throwable, of which there are 4 in the game: EMP, Typhoon Lure, Null Wave, and Implosion. EMPs are used on robots, but I found myself using them on the environment more than on actual enemies. Typhon lures Typhon as the name suggests, and are completely useless except for getting multiple Typhons to group up so that other grenades can be used to kill them. Which sounds great, but in my playthrough the opportunity for that only presented itself once or twice. The final two grenades are pretty good though. Null Wave damages Typhons and disables their special ability for 30 seconds. And Implosion grenades, well, they implode and suck up all matter in a short radius and turns it into tiny cubes. It actually took me way too long to catch on to the fact that they were implosion grenades because we were in space where explosions is a big no-no. As we acquaint ourselves with all these new abilities and gadgets and use them to traverse the environment and defeat the enemies, we arrived at the entrance to Dr. Calvino's office and find out that there was a hull breach and the office along with Dr. Calvino was vented into space, and that includes a keycard which we need because that was on Dr. Calvino's person. Or rather, it's on Dr. Calvino's person still, and that person is now a corpse and floating around just outside the window. But all is not lost. We can go outside, we just need to pick up a fabrication plan to load it into the fabricator so that we can make a zero-G propulsion system. On my way there, I found a crossbow which I kept in my inventory for around 4 hours, and then I scrapped it when I realized that I couldn't find any use for it since it doesn't do damage, and it heavily hints that it's used for distraction purposes and for activating faraway buttons. But I'm already on my way to become a stealth man, so I don't exactly need that. But now that I'm reviewing the footage from my first playthrough, I'm actually curious to what the crossbow's applications are. If you know, please comment down below. I'm sure I would have found out on my own if I, thought about it hard enough. But it was around this time that it clicked for me that the glue gun could actually be used to create platforms, and I actually managed to capture the exact moment my aha moment presented itself. As the dust settled on my amazement of what the glue could accomplish, I reached the manufacturer and created the zero-G propulsion suit, the crossbow which I ended up completely forgetting existed, and an ass ton of ammo for dealing with all the mimics in my way from here to the airlock. The zero-G propulsion suit actually also serves another function. Its rockets can be used to glide short distances, and the game actually provides a nice little subtle tutorial to show you this by placing a man up on a platform and a waypoint next to him. And if only the rest of the game was that subtle about its tutorials, because, man. This game really fucking likes to tell you that it's an open world immersive sim game where you can do whatever you want and approach all the objectives in which way you want to. And thinking outside the box and using tools intended to do one thing to do another thing is often rewarded by giving you extra loot and letting you skip parts of the game. And the game reminds you that you can do all of these things every goddamn chance it gets. Every time you go to space, it's gonna tell you how the suit works. Every time there's a loading screen, it's gonna tell you how a certain item works, and so on and so on. And it's the only thing that generally irks me about this experience. I would have been angry about this, but this is a Bethesda published game, and every time there are on-screen instructions telling me how to do basic movement controls, I remind myself that it's amazing that Bethesda even allowed a game to exist where you have to use your brain occasionally to bypass certain obstacles. And that in-your-face tutorials and a dumb NPC telling you that your brother is evil, hint hint wink wink, is a small price to play a game that doesn't make you feel like your brain is melting because it treats you like a dumb baby. Anyways, with the propulsion suit equipped, we can go out into space, and fuck me, is it a great feeling. I love a good spacewalk, and this game fucking delivers. You have 6 degrees of freedom, which means that there's no up and there's no down. You got forward and backward thrusters as well as up and down, and some limited strafe. If you go too fast and bump into something, you take damage or die, and if you don't go fast enough, then the Typhon will come and get you, and then you will also die. To not die from being too fast or too slow, you have to crank the speed up in the open areas and plan your turns and slow down, speed up or turn in anticipation of the trajectory, and when you manage to go through a 90-degree turn tunnel while dodging debris with a Typhon on your tail, it's a pretty great feeling. If I had to say a bad thing about the space sections, it's that they are very brief and very few and far in between. This walk in particular, where we need to find Dr. Calvino's corpse, takes a couple of minutes, and then we're back inside the airlock, and it's kind of a shame that it's already over. Using the keycard, we gain access to the lab that contains the psychoscope, a sort of like the game's version of a Batman vision that will over time grant us access to more and more information on each individual type of Typhon and their strengths and weaknesses. Or at least that's what it says on the instructions. See, I did not actually use it a terrible lot, because aside from the scan feature that lets me spot mimics every time I entered a room I hadn't been in before, I think the psychoscope is mainly supposed to be a companion to the other thing we just gained access to, the Typhon powers. See, this skill tree is the entire reason that Morgan was even being experimented on, and partly why his memory had to be wiped. Not because of the knowledge of the Typhon powers, but because he had to test out a bunch of them. And when you remove a neuromod, it wipes your memory, yada yada yada, convenient plot reason to have an amnesiac protagonist. Anyways, my point is that the psychoscope ties in heavily to this skill tree. I think as scanning the Typhons around the station will not only tell us what kind of grenades to use on them, but also allow Morgan to eventually learn their unique abilities. Or at least that's my theory. I didn't actually use any of the Typhon abilities besides the one that the game heavily encouraged me to pick, and as such I never really read up on the skill tree or the further utility of the psychoscope.
global lockdown.
To get to the next part of the station, we're gonna need Daniel Show's voice, and that is easier said than done, because she's missing and possibly dead. And her quarters are overrun by humans that are being mind controlled by a typhon. Luckily, thanks to a hot tip on Twitter, I picked up a stun gun that I can use to non-lethally take down the humanoid enemies, and isolate the mind controlling typhon and take it down. And as I did, I discovered that Show was very much alive and hiding just outside the window where I was. And I managed to communicate with her to get her a voice sample, and completely skipped out on having to piece a complete sample of her voice together from jumbled recordings I could find around the station. Nice! However, the confrontation with her by the fitness gym's window is an absolutely heartbreaking moment. We only found out where she was because we found a note on her dead girlfriend, and she knows just because Morgan is the one approaching her here and using the secret signal we learned about in the note, and that, well, her girlfriend is dead. But in a very real moment, upon her realizing this, she pushes her grief aside from just a moment and tells Morgan what he needs to do to stop all of this. Or at least what the next little step is towards the stopping of things. The neat thing about this is that doing a side quest led me here, and it lets me completely skip searching the crew cabins and finding whatever mimics might be hiding in there. And it also hints that if we had approached the situation in a different order, we could have run into Abigail, the dead girlfriend, first, and that would have put us on to the fact that the cook is not who he says he is. Besides, you know, his entire personality screaming traitor.
Hey, over here!
Oh, did I mention we met Walton Goggins for whatever reason? I mean, a character played by the actor Walton Goggins.
I saw one of them science types going to that armory. Saw him punching the code.
He appears in one scene and then we don't see him anymore.
My name's Aaron Ingram.
And yeah, I don't know why he's here.
Here, I open freezer now, like I promised. Maybe there's still things for you. Or maybe...
After freeing ourselves from the freezer room where we got locked in by the totally suspicious cook, I took that as an opportunity to take a break from the main story and go seek out some side quests and pick up a few neuromods, as they were really not handed to the player in the game's main story. I mean, you really have to work for them, and I super appreciate that. One of the highlights of my detour was the one that unlocks a secret ending and ends the game early, and actually reveals the twist of the whole game about 10 hours early. And while that could be seen as the game being dumb and spoiling itself, I see it as a great Easter egg for resourceful players comfortable with the game's mechanics. I definitely picked the right time to go do the side quest and get the extra neuromods, because the very next main mission gets Morgan and I locked out of the station and stuck in space as Alex takes control of the doors. However, all is not for naught. We learn that not everyone in the station is dead, and they are conveniently holed up in the only area of the station that we have not been able to get into until now, the cargo bay.
Don't open the door!
Using the automated cargo docking system, Morgan and I made our way to the cargo bay and brought a scientist that we had been looking for with us, as he was also stuck in the vacuum of space. Inside, we join up with the resistance and make a final stand against the Typhon and clear out the cargo bay and take full control of it. Next up on our adventure is clearing a way to the reactor and get the kill key so that we can blow up the space station to make sure that the Typhon problem stays contained and doesn't make its way to Earth. During the mission to do that, we run into an old flame and go out of our way to find her medicine to relieve her paraplex, a kind of immunoresponse disease that rejects neuromods and shut down the subject's bodily functions over time and eventually kills them. This sounds like a random tidbit of information, but it's actually gonna be brought up later again in the game. However, what isn't gonna be brought up again is the nightmare fights. as this will be the last one, and thank fucking god, because they lose their charm real fucking fast after the first one is gone and done. So, nightmares are these events that trigger where a big ass beast starts chasing you and you have to evade it for a set amount of time and then it will go away. It's meant to be this thing that will remind the player of how insignificant they are and how squishy they are compared to the threat they are facing, despite however many neuromass and abilities and equipment they pick up, but the nightmares shouldn't have been plural, there should just have been the one, and it should have been done better so that it would actually be a frightening encounter, regardless of the environment. Like, for real, most of the encounters, if not all of them, have a convenient hidey hole you can hop into and just sit in for a solid 2 minutes waiting for the timer to run out. And get rid of the fucking timer. Horror is the fear of the unknown. Randomize those times and don't let me know how many more seconds I gotta wait it out before it fucks off. That's fucking dumb. Anyways, after the final nightmare is gone and done, we prep the reactor, break Alex's logout and gain control of the station. Alex, realizing that he has no other cards to play, suggests that we meet up and work out a deal, so we go do that. However, before that, the other survivors demand to know what is going on, and at Morgan's office he tells them about January and about everything. They aren't too pleased with our decision to go and talk to Alex, who has been trying to almost kill us a lot of times along the way. However, we have earned a little good faith through the whole rescuing all of their asses, so we double dip and agree to help the survivors and still go see Alex. At the office we learn that Alex hasn't exactly been working against us. He's been following a previous version of Morgan's plans, and everything he has done has been according to our instructions, or rather, a previous version of ourselves' instructions. And we have actively been working against our previous self's wishes for some reason. However, you could argue that the previous versions of Morgan aren't actually Morgan, because Morgan is a result of the choices he has made now in his current consciousness, and they define his character. So if we're currently working against our previous self's wishes, then our previous selves aren't us. Anyways, the U family reunion is cut short. Just as Morgan gets Alex's arming key, a squadron of security forces sent on behalf of the Yu brothers' parents and under the leadership of the security chief Dahl arrive and take control of the station and start hunting and killing everyone on board. And no one is safe, as even the Yus are on their hit list. And may I remind you that they are the children of the corporation's owners. Talk about some family drama, man. The betrayal convinces Alex that he should help Morgan blow up the station, but before that can be achieved, we have to take care of Dahl. And this is yet another one of those really cool moments where there is a situation in front of you that you can solve in the normal way, or you can go snoop around in Dahl's shuttle, pick up some clues, some passwords, read up on security stuff and show up at the confrontation prepared and with a plan that makes a tough situation a whole lot easier to deal with. See, what happens is that Dahl shuts off oxygen to the cargo bay in an attempt to force Morgan to comply with his demand and give himself up. But because we prepared ourselves, we can turn off the oxygen in the room that Dahl is in and take him down non-lethally and return oxygen to the cargo bay while he's unconscious. In a fun twist, the survivors used the same brainwipe method that the Typhon neuromods caused Morgan and the plot of the game to happen on Dahl and make him forget why he's even there on the station and get him to disable the security forces and fly everyone home. At the end of the game, we are faced with a dilemma. Use an experimental science thing to wipe out all of the Typhon on the station and leave the station intact, and risk leaving a chemical signature behind that can be seen across the universe and possibly alert other Typhon to the presence of Earth and humans. And in the process, enable Alex to create Typhon neuromods that will enable the rich and powerful to become superhuman, or blow everyone up, including yourself. Obviously, the last option is the best option, but since I got an insight into how the ending happens via the Easter egg ending, I learned that the rich superhuman Typhon thing is unfortunately the canon ending.
If you want to activate the null wave, you'll have to kill me.
Alex's plan worked, but the fear of the chemical signature being seen by the Typhon unfortunately turned out to be true, as it turns out that our entire adventure in the game has just been a simulation. All this time we were a Typhon-Morgan hybrid reliving the events of what happened aboard the station. After the events of that, Earth was discovered and the Typhon invaded, or rather infected. The thing about the rich and powerful gaining superpowers, however, yeah, that didn't work out for them. The Typhon neuromods never worked on anyone but Morgan or clones of Morgan. So what's the point of the simulation then? Well, it's simple. Instead of giving humans Typhon powers, Alex figured out that he could give the Typhon human powers. Or rather, human personalities. So that they /you/us/Morgan's clones could be used to repel the invading, or rather infecting, Typhons. So, wow, fuck, that was a good game. It definitely ran a little too long. There was a few times throughout the game, specifically in the last half, where I was getting a bit bored. But in the few occasions that happened, there was almost always a new exciting thing just around the corner that brought me back in. I would love to see what happens in the sequel, but unfortunately there is not gonna be one. Because despite the game selling millions of copies, which is pretty fucking good for a niche game like this, Prey underperformed to Bethesda's expectations, and the sequel, which was in pre-production, was cancelled. Is there a rant in here somewhere where I call Bethesda idiots for expecting Prey to generate the same sales numbers as their surprise hit Dishonored, because it's incredibly ridiculous to base your sales prediction on a surprise hit? Yes, obviously there is a rant about that in here somewhere, but I'm not gonna do that. Instead, I'm gonna tell you to go play Prey, the new one, and enjoy it. It's a good self-contained game-ish and you should play it. It has nothing to do with old Prey, and it's not even really a horror game, and the mimicking is only an incredibly small part of the game, really. Anything they use to advertise the game actually isn't really here, which is dishonest, but it's also stupid, because they could instead have used all of the good features, like the whole game being an open world immersive sim set in space, to sell the game with. So yeah, play Prey, it's good. It's an unofficial System Shock game and it deserves your attention. And between me playing Prey for the first time and now, the studio that owns the right to the System Shock franchise failed to deliver their System Shock remake. Warren Spector's System Shock 3 is vaporware, and the franchise is now owned by Big Daddy Shi, so Prey 17 might be the last System Shock, at least for a long time. Well, until next time, bye bye.